don't think you're not a leader because you're not at a certain age or at a certain level. You can still be a leader by how you interact, how you engage, how you listen, how you learn, and by setting an example, and how you praise and reward and recognize those around you. I'm Andrew Pearce, and I'm a Managing Director in Accenture Operations UK and Ireland. So primarily my role is looking after a portfolio of clients, supporting them on their journey, their transformation journey, and ensuring that we continue to add value and engage the wider Accenture as they need to look at their business outcomes and their strategy. And that is 60% of my time. The other 40% of my time is actually working in inclusion and diversity in the external ethnicity sponsor role, which covers a number of areas, because there's also internal aspects to that as well. But external is to actually be a voice about what we're doing in Accenture, what we've learned around about creating an inclusive workplace and an inclusive business, working with our external partners, and also, as I mentioned, developing some of our internal approaches to really drive lasting and meaningful change. I think it's a number of factors, right? One is I've always been very passionate about inclusion and diversity across all of the areas that covers. But in particular, my focus has been around ethnicity, and particularly around Black talent. And that's driven, one, by my own experiences, and two, by wanting to ensure that we create an environment where young Black talent can succeed, where we will see greater representation at the high levels in businesses and organizations. And to do that, there has to be change. And so I was always very keen to have conversations, to challenge, to point out and be an advisor and to support going forward as to where we were. So that's point one from my personal perspective. The other is the business realization. You know, Accenture has been very clear about wanting to be the most inclusive company in the world. And inclusive not only in the sense that you have diversity, but inclusive so that everybody has an equal chance, everybody has a voice, everybody's treated with respect, and everybody has a sense of belonging. You know, so it's not only a case of having a seat at the table, it's also having a voice at the table, and being able to provide an equitable view with everybody else. Now, I've been with Accenture now, it'll be 14 years actually in December. And previous to that, I'd spent 10 years with startups, primarily American software consultancy startups. And then previous to that, I had 16 years as an AirForce officer. So my journey is not the norm, one could argue, from that corporate perspective, having military, then done the kind of working with startups, which is a great place to work because you have to do everything, you know, whether it be sales, whether it be pre-sales, whether it be training, whether it be project management. So you can actually learn a large portfolio of skills before I joined Accenture. You know, I spent 16 years as an AirForce officer, and I suppose those skills and attributes are applicable anywhere, whether that's, you know, and primarily around leadership, about what it means to be a leader, what it means to make decisions, to have a plan both tactically and strategically, to understand risk, and to provide a vision and guide the team that you're fortunate to lead. Because at the end of the day, it is about the team and what the team does. And it's your role to help and develop that team. And that's very much the ethos of military leadership. Now, you can apply that just as well in the business sphere as you can in the military sphere. So there are many pieces you can take from the military perspective and bring in the business perspective, and it does work the other way around as well. You know, there are certain things that business is much better at than in the military, and so there is a cross-fertilization that can take place. Well, bearing in mind that I was brought up in the 60s, I was adopted, so I was the only black person, right? So there was always that perspective, which plays an interesting factor and also drives my passion for inclusion, having been excluded for so much of that time during my younger years. I was studious, very competitive, very studious, and that was certainly supported by the fact that whereas I wouldn't necessarily be out playing because people didn't necessarily want to play with me, I'd be reading books or playing with electronics or doing something practical. So I was very studious in that sense, and as I said, meant very competitive. I was also sporty. I played county squash. I played chess as well, competitive level. I played rugby, but my primary thing was study. So I was very studious, particularly around the sciences. So that's what I was like as a youngster. In fact, my aim would have been to have gone into academia, to have done a DPhil in medical physics, and then probably stayed in academia. And it's purely by happen chance that I saw something about physics and maths, and the graduates wanted it in the AirForce will sponsor you. That I happened in my second year to then take a sponsorship and finish up in the AirForce. Every case is every case, right? And it's how people feel. At the end of the day, it's how people feel. But the bottom line is this: is if you're an organisation where it's very clear that there is a zero tolerance for any kind of harassment, be it racial or otherwise, then go and speak to somebody and be very clear that this has happened. And if you don't feel as though you can speak necessarily to HR, find someone in leadership who you trust and have that conversation, who you know is an ally. If it's an organisation where you don't believe that policy exists, to be quite honest, go and find somewhere else. You have to be happy where you work. Do what you enjoy and enjoy what you do. So really, there are only two options. No one should endure it. We know that there are very clear policies that companies have. That doesn't necessarily mean that they action those policies. So that's why I say organizations that are clear about this and have stated with clarity that there is zero tolerance and have a clear way of reporting those concerns, even if it's anonymously, then one, do that. Because, as I say, if you don't feel confident, you can find someone that will do it with you. Otherwise, if you really don't believe that you can ever be included, and don't going to believe it's change, then you must look to find somewhere else, because somebody else, somewhere out there is another role for you. We're not living in the 70s and 80s and 90s anymore, where people would just put up with the banter, right? Banter is not banter, it is racism. Let's call it what it is. I've often heard that phrase, I was just using banter about his skin colour. No, that remark was effectively racist. We don't live in that world. And no one should have to put up with that. Allyship is so important, because if you're the only black person in the room and this is happening, and you don't feel, especially if you feel as though you might be junior to the individuals that are involved in there, you don't feel as though you'll have a voice or be taken seriously. Building allies is so important. Those advocates who are there, who you can either go and speak to, or if you're fortunate, are in the room when it happens, who will speak on your behalf. That's why allyship is so vitally important across all those dimensions that we see, where you've got minority populations, because they need to be the voice when sometimes you feel as though you can't be. And therefore, if those allies aren't there and you don't feel you can speak, then maybe you should go and find somewhere you know that there can be allies, and that you know that you will be heard, and you know that you'll be valued. Because no one should just have to fit in. That's not the way that we have to work anymore. Enjoy what you do and do what you enjoy. So find a role, or find your studies, or find something that you really enjoy doing. Because when you're working, that's going to be a major part of your life. And there is more opportunity than ever before to find something that works how you want to work, with flexibility and how people will work, especially how we will work in the future, and to enjoy what you do. Secondly, never stop learning. never stop learning. Always continue to learn, no matter, how you may become in an organization or a business or in a charity or, in the community. Never stop learning, because there's always something to learn. The other thing I'd say is learn to listen. At the end of the day, when we're talking, we're repeating effectively what we already know. But when you listen, you may learn something new. So learn to listen. Learn to listen to the people around you about their experiences and their challenges. Learn to listen to your clients. But going back to people around you, your team, understanding and listening to them, understanding their challenges, building that relationship will help you to become a much more inclusive leader. And that is what we need going forward. That's what modern leadership is about. It is about empathy. It's about being inclusive. It's about, remembering that the work is not done by you, it's done by the team. It's about recognizing and rewarding that. It's about forgiving mistakes. It's about being inspirational. It's about communication. It's about having that growth in terms of constantly learning yourself. But listening is a big part of that.